or 1.5%, then it comes to about 30% of the 5%, it comes to 1.5%. If you combine the two, it's about 3%. So the 3%, if you increase the turnover threshold for both VAT and income tax, you're effectively taxing both income tax and VAT, yet simplifying the tax regime. And lastly, in terms of the personal income tax, the simplification comes, with reduction in personal exemptions that people have, but bringing a zero rate tax to the very low end of the tax system. And then in terms of the corporate sector, instead of having a profit-based lower tax rate, one way would be to have the same tax rate across the corporations, but then have pro-investment cost-based incentives that ensure that you get incentives if you're really investing, into your sector. And these are some ways, in which we can align the long-term and the short-term needs.
Thank you very much, Director, for just that very clear outlining of what needs to be done and what could be done. I want to borrow on your opening remark where you said taxation cannot be viewed in isolation. There are other factors and other players in this particular space. And another very critical player is the judiciary. Justice Alfred Mabea, you are the presiding judge of the Commercial and Tax Division at the High Court of Kenya. So matters taxation are close to your heart, as they are close to the heart of Kenya Revenue Authority. So what, in your view, how would the judiciary support an effective and predictable, and I think the other word we have gotten is stable, tax system? So effective, predictable, and stable tax system. Justice Alfred, please unmute. There you go. No, unmute. I think you're still on mute. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
On the part of the judiciary, we play a very crucial role in supporting, to support the effective, practical, and predictable tax system. This we do in various ways. One is by interpretation of tax laws. We are the ones who interpret and apply the tax laws when the disputes arise. So our role in interpreting the tax laws ensures that the tax regulations are clear, consistently applied, which therefore helps in predictability. The taxpayer is able to predict and know and understand the obligations and the liability that he has to meet. And it also helps the tax administrator to know how to apply the tax law. Number two is by adjudicating the tax disputes between the taxpayers as well as the tax authorities. A fair and efficient judicial system ensures that the taxpayer has a venue to challenge any tax assessments which they believe that it is incorrect, either unfair or that promotes unfairness. So with the effective and good interpretation of and settlement of tax disputes, it promotes practicality as well as fairness in the tax system. The third limb is that in applying the law, the judiciary has to provide the legal certainty by issuing judgments that set legal precedents. When the courts provide clear and consistent rulings on tax matters, the taxpayers as well as the tax authorities can better predict the outcomes of the actions as well as decisions. That will lead to tax compliance and reduces uncertainty in tax systems. The other area that we do support the effective, practical, and predictable tax system is to uphold the rule of law. An independent judiciary that upholds the rule of law ensures that the tax authorities operate within the constitution as well as the legal limits, and there is no abuse of power. It also, that helps in preventing arbitrary and unfair taxation practices, which contributes to effective tax system, which respects the taxpayers' rights. When the judiciary safeguards the rights of the taxpayer by ensuring that they are treated fairly and in accordance with the law, by protecting them from any harassment and abuse of power by the tax authorities, that ensures the due process, and then tax dispute resolution is fast-tracked and tax compliance increases. Sixthly, by promoting accountability, the judiciary can hold tax authorities accountable for their actions and decisions, because a decision of the tax authority can be very devastating to a taxpayer, for a business, or for any entity. Therefore, if the tax authorities are put to order by the judiciary stepping in to rectify the situation, that maintains the integrity of the tax system and predictability. Then there is also promoting compliance. When there is knowledge that there is a fair and effective judicial system that resolves disputes, the taxpayers are more likely to comply with the tax laws rather than indulge in tax evasion and such like ills. This reduces the need for aggressive tax enforcement measures and fosters cooperation, which the first, I think Mr. Muteti talked about, cooperative tax compliance culture. And finally, there is also the support, it supports investment and economic growth. A reliable and predictable tax system that is supported by an impartial judiciary attracts foreign and domestic investment. The investors are more likely to commit capital when they have confidence in the tax regime and the legal framework. So therefore, the judiciary in Kenya, we play a vital role by upholding the rule of law, ensuring that tax disputes are determined swiftly and fairly, and by ensuring that there is fair and effective administration of the tax system, Ms. Kimani. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice Mabeya. Reduction of uncertainty in tax systems. I want to bring in the perspective from Dr. Julius Kignetich. Doctor, you've worked both in government and private sector, so you sort of have a 360-degree view of taxation from where you sit. We've heard from the players of the judiciary, but insurance is also part and parcel of this conversation. Remember what Director Sharp said, challenged us, that taxation cannot be viewed as in isolation. There are many other players. So from your perspective, Daktari, how does the insurance industry contribute to the public-private dialogue on tax policy reform, ensuring that the perspectives and needs of the sector are considered in the pursuit of broader economic goals?
Okay, thank you very much. I think this is a very nice conversation on making sure that we promote an environment where tax collection go higher. But remember, taxation is not the end in itself. Okay, it is creating an environment as a country for people to lead their lives happily. Okay, in Vision 2030, we talked about, a high quality of life. That's really the goal. Now, taxation is a means to promoting that high quality of life. And what does that mean? You see, taxation is a levy on production. Okay. So therefore, taxation doesn't exist in isolation. It exists because production has occurred. So therefore, the National Treasury and KRA must first and foremost ensure that we have sufficient incentives for production to happen. For production to happen, investment must occur. So as a country overall, how are we streamlining the process of ensuring that investors come to Kenya? And I was glad to listen to Justice Mabea about, because the first thing that investors look for is a predictable justice system. Okay, if I have a dispute, I can go to court, and the court process ensures that all these things happen very quickly. Okay, I'm not sure whether you can see me. It's a lot of light. Just 1 minute. Okay, so I was saying that the justice system must be streamlined. If you streamline the justice system, then we are encouraging production. So to me, any seminar, future seminar in the medium term by KRA should be sitting with the National Treasury and ensuring how do we encourage production. If we encourage production, taxes will come. Don't worry, because it's a levy on production. But now we have a situation where production is severely stressed. Investors are not investing. You heard the minister say, we are struggling to put, the MSMEs. He's actually struggling to encourage production in the economy. And once production is underway, then we are good to go, because the taxation follows that. So anything we do, whether we are trying to, formulate tax policy, the core of it is sitting with the National Treasury, ask ourselves, how are we encouraging output and income in the economy? If we encourage output and income, then taxation is a levy, it's a piece of that action. So, and so therefore, to me, that is the core. The core of national tax policy is ensuring we encourage and promote production. Okay, there must be incentives for that. Okay, of course, then a lot of things then go around it and say, okay, how are we doing that? The second one I would like to mention very strongly, which I see it even, I saw it in government when I was there and now seeing it from outside, is standardization of taxation, both at local level, county level, and at national government. The conversations we have been having, I've listened even to the earlier panel, is we are now only concentrating on taxation at national government level. Now, we forget that the investors sit at the county government. National government has no land, it's floating in there. They sit. If they come to Nairobi, okay, they have to deal with a very inefficient system at Nairobi City County. Or if they go to Kisumu, how efficient is the county government of Kisumu in executing the national policy and also local government levies? So there are so many illegal levies that are being done, or levies which are not, with the national government does not have visibility. Now, if you don't have visibility, from an investor point of view, a tax is a tax. I don't see the difference between the county government of Nairobi and the national government. Both of them are government, and they're equal in the constitution. So therefore, my proposal is KRA, by policy, be in charge of taxation, both at government, national government level, and county government. This idea of county governments creating their own, contraptions. No. We must have one authority that collects taxes across the board. Then they can distribute those taxes to the government. They give it to the national government and they distribute. But collection must be united and one. That makes sure that me as an investor, whether it's insurance industry or otherwise, I know that when it comes to payment of tax, I only pay to KRA and it is final. But right now I deal with KRA is coming, the county government is coming, and they keep changing these agencies. So Mara, it's their own employees. Mara, it's an employed agent. We cannot have such a system in a government. We must have one united tax collector. Then it's very easy to predict, and it helps the government, okay? Then the other thing is, I just want to support Justice Mabea on the issue of dispute resolution. There will always be tax disputes. Now, what we want, I would like as a way of policy, is the tax tribunals and the tax courts set a timeline, very clear timeline. If tax disputes must be resolved within 90 days or 180 days, if we agree, negotiate and agree on a timeline, then the justice system, whether it's a tax tribunal, whether it's a high court or Supreme Court, we must set timelines. Why is this important? It goes back to my earlier point of the taxation is a means to an end. We must encourage production. I can't be sitting in or pleading with KRA, okay, to resolve a tax matter. They should be telling me that issue is resolved, go and produce, because you get a levy of that production. So everything must be done in our means to make sure that occur. So it is in our so it is on our interest that we must support production. And so the dispute resolution mechanism must be one of the most efficient. Now, Kenya government talks about being a Singapore. If there's something Singapore are very efficient, is those tax disputes. They are very, very, very efficient. The other thing that I would like to reinforce what the minister talked about, and I have talked about this in very many forums, which is formalization of our informal sector, okay? And I just want to talk of one example because I sat on the board of KTDA and I know how KTDA works and how it streamlines the whole process of formalization. You see, there are 600,000 tea farmers, smallholders. Okay, the average is around an acre. Okay, 600,000. Now, why is the tea industry #1 in foreign exchange as a commodity? Okay, because it competes now with tourism neck and neck. The reason why it competes with tourism neck and neck is the formalization of an informal sector. And if the National Treasury and KRA sit together and say, how do we create a KTDA equivalent in every sector possible? Every sector, we have a KTDA equivalent. So these aggregators are then therefore formalizing an informal sector. Instead of having to deal with 600,000 individual farmers, we just deal with one entity that unites all of them. Now, one of the challenges I see is for the last 2-3 years, one of the biggest efforts of government is to destroy KTDA. It is a puzzle. I've never understood why Kenya government wants to destroy KTDA. Instead of now creating more KTDAs, we have fought the existing one. Now, we fought KPCU, coffee collapsed. We fought Cotton Lint and Seed Marketing Board, cotton crashed. Virtually every sector that government has fought in trying to formalize the informal sector, it collapsed. So Kenya government must be in the forefront of creating aggregators for everything possible. Those 18 million people must belong to an aggregation system similar to KTDA. Let me tell you, if you create that formality, revenue collection among the 18 million just shoots. I guarantee you, I sat on the board for KTDA for 9 years and I said, I wish everything like that in Kenya worked like that. If I'm a tea farmer, My job is just to deliver my tea at the buying center, and my job ends. And I get an SMS for the number of kilos I delivered on that day. KTDA picks up everything from there up to the international markets. And they charge 24% commission for everything. The farmer gets 76%. It is the highest paid tea smallholder farmer in the world. We can do the same for everything. So all those problems that Minister Chelogui was talking about will be resolved if we just create aggregation for everything we produce. We now are doing very well in avocados. If you encourage that production, your next tax will be avocados. Flowers, the same, okay? For this particular instance, they say Kenya government has not interfered with flower production, and so therefore it works. But if your intervention is to encourage aggregation by policy, okay, by law, then you create a predictable environment. And please, for heaven's sake, Kenya government, don't fight it. Encourage it. Okay? Why even it's being fought, that I leave to you. The last comment I'll make is on institutional strengthening. We rarely talk about institutions, but institutions execute policy. Now, if we create very nice laws and everything, and we don't create the necessary institutional framework to execute what we have put in place, we go nowhere. Again, our ambitions of being a Singapore. Being a Singapore means you have the best people to run your institutions. The best paid civil servants in the world are Singaporeans. Now, they are given the right values, they are patriotic, and they are the best paid. Now, that makes government attract the top brains in the world to run your institution. So my recommendation in this particular forum today, as part of strengthening national tax policy, is to strengthen the National Treasury and KRA. When we were in university, the top audit companies used to come for the top students. Okay? And so therefore, they are able to do the audits because they attract the best. Why can't KRA attract the very best of our finance students, of our insurance students, the very best, top of the world? I'm glad now you have a CEO from Harvard, okay? Why can't we have similar people all the way to the last person in the chain? Top. Same thing in the National Treasury, okay? There are so many of our children who are now in top universities in the world. Some of them are even universities locally. Let us attract this. If you want to execute tax policy, we must create the best people, must have the best people in the right positions, both at the National Treasury and KRA, and by extension, the entire public service. Because public service is not an employment bureau. Public service is a mechanism to deliver certain things to the public. And the final word I'm going to mention is something I think Ashif talked about, which was the principles of taxation: fairness, simple, efficiency. Now, the best marketing to collect more taxes is a satisfied taxpayer. We do the same in business. Your best customer, your best marketer is a satisfied customer. Doesn't matter how much advertising we do. But if the customer is happy, the customer talks about it, word of mouth, to other people. So therefore, I look forward to the day I can come to the screen and tell Kenyans, I am satisfied, I pay my taxes, I file my returns because the road in my neighborhood was funded by my taxes. The sewage, by the way, I don't have a sewer now in Nairobi. The sewage that the water I receive, okay? The light, the street lighting, and I can demonstrate on a TV and say, this street lighting came from my tax. That is the testimony. So I think the earlier panel talked about the link between taxation and government services. We must then bring those two together and say, okay, let the citizens testify that the services I'm receiving is as a result. I went to a hospital and I received the best treatment, and it was as a result of my taxes. And I'm encouraging every Kenyan to pay their taxes. The minute we can have citizens that can testify freely, openly, and enthusiastically about what government is doing, you will have gotten the score. You don't have to even hire askaris to chase. The satisfied customer is the one that gives us the reinforcement to do more tax collection. Thank you. Over to you.
Dr. For sure, the testimony is coming. Paid for by your taxes is on its way, where citizens will be the brand ambassadors of what their taxes do for them. And just to assure you, for sure, KRA does attract the top of the cream. So hold it tight right there. But thank you. The challenge is well received: incentivizing production, standardizing of taxation, a predictable tax dispute resolution process, formalizing the informal sector by aggregating businesses, strengthening the institution framework. I want to bring in Director Kasam here. You've had Dr. Julius Kibme teach. He's thrown it at us. He's given us quite some challenges, Director. From your perspective, could you give some examples, perhaps, maybe even for Dr. Julius's comfort, some examples of innovative tax policy measures that have successfully incentivized compliance and expanded the tax base without compromising on stability of the policy?
I think Dr. Julius had some valid points, around tax and satisfaction. And I think that is a critical part. If a taxpayer is not satisfied with what is happening with the money that is using to pay tax, he will never be satisfied. And I think that's a key challenge that KRA has. But I think in the last 3 years, I think KRA has done a few changes to policy that help taxpayers comply and expand the tax base that we require. The first was the VTDP that was introduced 4 years ago now. And the VTDP was basically that if you declare and pay your taxes that were due, there was a waiver of interest and penalties on a sliding scale basis, depending on the year in which you paid the taxes. But I think last year, that was even enhanced through the current Finance Act, which was a full amnesty on penalties, interest, and fines, that if you had any tax payable, including cases before appeals, and you agreed to pay the tax, the fines and the penalties will automatically be repealed. And this policy is on 3 areas. The first is that if you have any penalties or interest outstanding in your ledgers that in which you have already paid the principal tax, they will automatically be waived. The second is that, if you have any principal outstanding, you can pay it, you can agree a payment plan. And then once you pay that, the interest and penalties are automatically waived. And third is areas under dispute. If you come to an amicable solution through the ADR process, and you pay what is agreed, in a one lump sum or through a payment plan, again, interest and penalties are waived. And I think that penalty is very innovative because it helps 3 things. One, it helps clean all the old ledger balances where people were trying to get the legacy systems and the interest and penalties waived. The second is the whole issue around digital services tax, which has been made easier especially for foreign suppliers, where if you're carrying business over the digital marketplace, you pay 1.5% tax on the turnover, and that basically, is the final tax in Kenya, and that simplifies the taxation of the digital marketplace. The third have been the withholding tax and withholding VAT. Those are more of a compliance issue, because what happens is when somebody is paying you certain categories of invoices, or is paying you VAT, some portion is held as withholding tax or withholding VAT at source, and that brings the taxpayer into the tax system. But the other one was the provision that had been going, on about the inflationary adjustment to excise tax. And this was supposed to be a yearly process, was very cumbersome. And, based on the feedback that was received from various industries, that provision was deleted. And the tax policy now gives a much more favorable policy on how inflation adjustments will be made to excise policy. And then the lastly is rental residential income tax, which was reduced from 10% to 7.5%. And I think these are some of the ways in which there is encouragement to be tax compliant. But one other way is really, how do we bring the MSMEs to this fold? And I think the current system of income tax and VAT becomes very difficult for small businesses to comply. They will definitely have records of turnover, but they might not have sophisticated systems, to manage input VAT, output VAT, and others. And I think that's one area that needs to be looked at as part of the tax policy of how do we encourage, these people, to find it easier to comply on tax issues, and yet. We tax them at the gross level at a rate that is fair and which covers both indirectly income tax and VAT. And I think that's one area that is a key consideration of the national tax policy that is being formulated. And lastly, the issue of compliance and expanding tax base was the whole issue of e-teams. That doesn't need sophisticated gadgets. You can operate it on smartphones. I think one of the challenges people are still finding is keeping records. And one thing, if there's a small SME that is doing even 2 million shillings turnover today, their net margin at 5% is 100,000 shillings in net profit. Now, if the issue is that you're going to start asking them to increase the cost of compliance in that level of profit, they might not be able to absorb that. So to me, in some of the businesses, the combination of turnover tax and monitoring turnover, and then also linking tax to other sources of revenue recording, like to the the mobile money platforms to see what your turnovers are. Like Mauritius say, they through the banking system, looking at the banking and money transaction, are able to see what is the turnover declared vis-a-vis what is the turnovers that are reflected, in terms of banking and others. And if you're able to bring that, effectively through integration of systems and the use of artificial intelligence and data analytics, you might be able to weed out the non-compliant taxpayers from the compliant taxpayers, and then focus on those so that the compliant taxpayers, have this issue of certainty that once they've paid the tax and they've kept their records, there is nothing, for them to be worried about when the revenue, audit comes. And then for those small taxpayers, I think revenue audit should also then be linked to risk profile. And, that comes with the use of AI and data analytics. So those are some of the areas that, you can actually, have an innovative tax policy measures, which don't really, while expanding the tax base, without compromising stability. And I think KRA is on its way to looking at some of these integrations. Some of this, take a longer time for integration, but these are areas that are under consideration. But one thing, the taxpayers also need to know that after this amnesty is over, going forward, there is no waiver of interest and penalties. So compliance is a critical part, and ignorance of the law is no defense. So, for taxpayers, if they are, tax liabilities that are there, to be paid for the year 2022 and before, this is the easiest way to, bring compliance without bearing the cost of non-compliance if the principal tax is paid.
Correct, Director. Thank you very much for those insights. MRI, E-Team, Stuti, many things that KRA has done in terms of incentivizing the tax system. Predictable tax judiciary system. We have been challenged on incentivizing production. Richard Muteti from MSME, let me bring you into this conversation. You've heard from KRA, you've heard from the judiciary again, you've heard from the insurance industry, from Dr. Julius. Now we are talking about you. and we want to borrow on your experience. You have a perspective of the East Africa region. So you're able to tell us what has worked where and what has not worked where, so that what we are proposing does not sound like it's superfluous, but it's actually pragmatic. It's things that tomorrow perhaps we could start doing. So from where you sit, which countries have effectively expanded their tax bases while still maintaining predictability and stability? Remember, predictability and stability of the tax system have to balance on the scale, right? So as much as it's predictable, it has to be also stable of their tax systems. So, what have you seen from the countries you've worked with?
First I must thank my panelists, my fellow panelists, because in every of their sentence, they have, in one way or another, mentioned either MSME or formalizing the informal sector or something around that. Allow me, before I go to the best practices around the world, to put some perspectives into these issues around tax-based expansion and formalizing the informal sector and dealing with MSMEs. I want to state here on the onset that at the moment in this country, Kenya, we are on the right track because we have just started a very institutionalized relationship between KRA and the informal economic sector. In my position as a CEO of the MSME Sector Federation in the East Africa region, and in my position as the chairman of the Commercial Business SMEs Work Group, I want to inform you here that a lot of countries do not have relations with MSME sector. But there is a lot of academic and desktop studies about the MSME sector and a lot of pronouncements of how the MSME are important and why the informal sector should formalize. And these stories will keep going on and on. A lot has been spoken about ourselves as the MSMEs and as the informal economic sector. It's not rocket science. I just want to mention two things, if you don't mind, if you indulge me. Number one, we have done our own research as the informal sector. Aside from talking about stabilizing the tax regimes, having a predictable tax regime, having a flexible tax regime, and I'm very happy that the two previous panelists have spoken about aggregation, increasing productivity and competitiveness of the informal economic, the MSMEs or the economy, and most importantly, strengthening the institution. I'm with them on this one. But one of the biggest challenges that we have come to realize as a sector that affect compliance is lack of information, lack of adequate information and practical knowledge of the sector and how it operates and how it is structured by the tax regimes in the region. And here I'm talking about 29 countries. Their approach to tax-based expansion and informal sector is desktop, and their knowledge is driven by other countries' best practices and not domesticated. Number two, lack of institutionalized structured relation. I like what the previous speaker spoke about, focusing on some subsectors and strengthening them and formalizing, as we are advocating for a holistic approach to the sector. The sector is big. We operate in 4 major subsectors. We have the small manufacturers subsector that is divided into 18 subsectors. I'm happy the government is giving us the affordable housing project. A lot of our members are working around it. That's an avenue for formalization, identification, and dealing. That is our subsector of manufacturing within the 18 subsectors. There is the small traders. There is the service providers. There is the agro. We have realized that the lack of knowledge of how we are structured, it keeps us apart. Number 3, I like the issue of strengthening the institution, because in our experience, there's limited staff capacity to deal with the dynamics of the MSME sector. Let's face it, if you're talking about 18 million people, it doesn't matter how sophisticated you are. You need numbers and knowledgeable numbers to face them. I'm happy that we had some youngsters trained, and I heard that they were seen walking around my areas, my association areas in Kamukunji, Kikomba. That's another topic of discussion with KRA, because we have started a relationship. Now, moving to compliance, challenges of compliance. On our side, the sector has 0 or no information about tax issues and how they are applied. And I've given enough examples. I've even given an example where we went with the KRA staff to one of our clusters, and we spoke about tax to our people who didn't understand what tax is and what it does. When we talked about it is the one that does the electricity, the water, the guy removed money and told me, take this money to KRA and come again next week after I sell for more money. Lack of information and appropriate communication to this sector. This is not rocket science. We need to domesticate our approach to tax-based expansion and a good relationship to address competitiveness and competitiveness and productivity. The high cost of meeting tax obligations to the informal sector is something that is an elephant in the room. Most of the informal sector people do not have the luxury of the education you're talking about. These people can't file their returns per month. It's too costly. It's a daily economy. We need to be creative. We need to find ways of creating tools that identify and mitigate business transactions associated with them. Lack of financial records. We don't have financial records. We sell, we put the money in the pocket, we save others under the pillows, and we do things that you cannot imagine. You need to come with us and work with us. The complexities of tax administration processes will keep talking about sophistication, reaching out, but without addressing the real issues. We'll not reach there. Let me talk about tax administration framework. And we've been talking about this for quite some time now. And we are asking ourselves, how does KRA address compliance? With the big taxpayers, with middle taxpayers, with the formal sector, we have no problem with that. Those are people who are able, they can file returns, they can employ auditors, tax experts, and so on. If I give you an example, for example, in Nairobi, we have 165 associations. Each cluster has between 8,000 and 12,000 members on themselves. They're individual member association, individual businessmen. They can't afford to employ a tax expert or something like that. They need to do it themselves. Some of them are not educated. How are they going to file these returns? We need to show some sensitivity and calm down. And that's why I was saying, and I like the issue of institutional strengthening. And I want to repeat this to the leadership of KRA, both policy and administrative. This is a very big sector. It requires a special attention. This is the base of innovation. This is the base of this economy. We need to handle it in a very specific manner so that we increase productivity, we increase competitiveness, and as I said earlier in my TV discussions, the taxation to the informal sector or the MSMEs should be facilitative and not prohibitive. It should be aimed at, boosting the sector as a major employer in our country and encourage increase startups while boosting innovation and entrepreneurship. I just needed to bring this out, but I want to assure you that we have started a journey with KRA, and we are going to have a pilot in Kenya. We're going to have a pilot in Kenya that the other countries can borrow about. We don't need to talk about other countries and how they have done it. We have the capacity and the brains to do it in Kenya for people to talk about Kenya.
All right. And I'll borrow from your word. You say domesticate.
Yes. We need to domesticate our approaches and how we do our things. We don't need to start. We have studied other countries enough. We can study, we can do it ourselves here.
Okay.
We have heard of Singapore since I was born. Singapore, Malaysia, Singapore. When are we going to wake up and do something that people can talk about ourselves?
Challenge accepted, Richard. Okay.
Yes, I want to inform you that we are planning, and we're inviting you, we are planning a visit to the productive areas with the Commissioner General for the first time in the history of East and Central Africa, a Commissioner General of a tax authority institution in a country coming to Gikomba, coming to Kamukunji to see how we do our stuff. And I want to assure him that he's really awaited. We are going to close all the roads because we have viewed KRA as enemies of the sector, as enemies of the Jokali sector. We see KRA, we close shop. Now we have a relationship. We are talking. We are seeing the government understanding, and thanks to our president, is the bottom-up economic time. So we need to come up together and talk about ourselves. And if we relate well, we'll not borrow money. We're just borrowing money because we're not creative enough. Thank you very much.
Richard, thank you very much. Challenge accepted, Justice Mabea. People close shop when they hear about us. We need protection. No, that's on a lighter note. But allow me just to remind our delegates joining us online. We are taking in your questions. Go to the Q&A. Our panel of SMEs, subject matter experts, are actually responding to your questions. So thank you for them. They are coming. They are hot and fast. There are so many, but we appreciate you. Keep them coming. We are running slightly out of time, so we're just going to wrap up our conversation very quickly. But before we wrap it up, I want to bring in Justice Mabea. And just to ask, how can effective tax policies minimize disruptions and frequent court challenges of tax laws and policies? Dr. Julius Kipngetich talked about a predictable judiciary system that is favorable to investors, and that is part of incentivizing the production process. So from your perspective, how can we achieve this?
Thank you so much, Madam. Very fast. The first of it is that there has to be clarity and transparency in the policies as well, tax policies as well as tax laws. Where there is ambiguity, that is room for disputes. And when there are disputes, then we are in court and before the tax tribunal. Number two, we need to encourage stakeholder consultation. The policymakers as well as when these tax laws are being done, the government or those who make the policy need to consult widely, bring in the business associations, Mr. Muteti's people, and everybody, so that they discuss before these policies are made statutory or tax laws. That one minimizes disputes because the concerns are raised. When they are raised before the laws are passed, then there is no room for disputes that will be brought to court. Thirdly, there has to be fairness and equity. The tax policies should be perceived by all and sundry that they are equitable by the public as well as the business community. We must ensure that the taxes that are passed, they are not discriminative. They are across the board, they are equitable, and they apply across the board in a manner that is equitable. 5, we need to educate to increase education and awareness. Muteti has talked about his big group of 18 million people who don't know what taxes are. What are these taxes? How are they going to be paid? Why am I paying taxes from my small businesses? If we conduct public awareness and provide educational resources, then so that the taxpayers know their tax obligations and the benefits of compliance, then this will minimize disputes. Next, alternative dispute resolution. Not the court and the tribunal should not be the first point of call. The first point of call should be either mediation, arbitration. Once a dispute has arisen between the tax authorities and the taxpayer, it should be mandatory, I would say, in the tax laws. The first point of call should be an ADR. They discuss all these things by the time they come to the tax tribunal, which is the next level, which should be the next level after the dispute. All issues would have been minimized, and it would be a win-win situation for both the taxpayer as well as the tax administrator. Next, regular review and revision. Periodically, we should be reviewing and updating our laws and policies to ensure that they remain relevant and aligned with the changing economic as well as social landscape. Because the outdated laws, when you apply them to the current situation, you find that it makes room for disputes. Then international best practices, the policymakers as well, those who pass laws, we should adopt international best practices to adopt approaches that have proven successful in other countries. Although Mr. Muteti says we should domesticate them, yes, we learn from those who have been able to pass and who have been able to make it and they have succeeded. We apply to our own local situation so that we minimize tax disputes. Then finally is professional development. Dr. Kipngetich talked about taking the very best, top, invest in the training and professional development of tax administrators, as well as the legal profession, so that we enhance the expertise in tax matters, so that when we have proper administration of the tax laws, there is fewer and lesser disputes in our courts. For Dr. Kipngetich, we have tried, on the issue of timelines, with the revamping of the tax appeals tribunal, as well as the High Court, we are looking forward that will bring down the issue of disputes to at least 1 year maximum, so that at least taxpayers, businessmen will be in a better position to know, and so that a tax dispute does not go into the next financial year. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Justice Mabea. Delegates, we're about to finish plenary 2 of the Annual Tax Summit. Very interesting conversations. We just don't want them to stop, but time is not on our side, but we need to wrap this up. I have seen so many questions in the Q&A, amazing discussions going on. For instance, Eddie Simiu says the matter of the link between production, tax and economic growth, in my opinion, can be negotiated if first we go back to Vision 2030 and include the manufacturing targets of the Big Four agenda. Secondly, public participation in the budget cycle is enhanced through reintroduction of National Economic and Social Council, where the private sector plays a major role. As we take our last comments, final words from my panelists, I'm informed that Mr. Henry Kafogo, he's the chairman of the Water Bottlers Association, has a quick comment to make. Is his microphone enabled? Okay, I understand he has left, but thank you very much. I see you, Isaiah, you're saying it's a very constructive engagement, which should be constantly done. And you say on the issue of closing shops by Moteti is a reality. Outside here, I assume Isaiah is part of your MSME. And he says it's a reality outside here because of the harassment perception, I like the word perception. I believe the sensitization and interactive consultations by KRA will change the situation and increase the revenues by government. It's all in the information. Distinguished panelists, distinguished delegates, allow me to request our panel to give us their final words as we wrap plenary 2 that was talking about promoting predictability and stability of the tax system, the national tax policy as a tool for tax-based expansion. I want to start with Dr. Julius Kipngetich to give us his final word, and then I will continue, and then we shall take a screen grab and wrap our session. Dr. What are you hearing, and what's your final challenge to KRA now that we have your 6-point challenge?
Okay, my final challenge to KRA is just figures, okay? Our GDP is $110 billion. At today's currency level, it is 16.5 trillion Kenya shillings. Now, traditionally, Kenya government has been taking 25% as taxes overall. So given that size of GDP, therefore, we should be collecting 4.125 trillion as tax. Now, the question is, why are we collecting half that? So once we understand that gap analysis, then we say, are we lacking in incentives? Are we poor in tax administration? Are we unpredictable? Are there tax leakages in the system, people not paying? And why are they not punished for not paying? Okay. Are there corruption within KRA itself? So let's explain why we are collecting half of the potential, which is the optimal tax where Kenya has been set, I think, 25% of GDP. Okay. If that is the situation, let us just explain that gap. And if we are able to explain that gap, then we work towards ensuring that that gap is filled. And I believe that if we do that, then we reduce our dependency on foreign loans, and we also encourage production. And production increases employment. Employment means more tax. So we just create a virtuous cycle. Right now, we are in a sort of a vicious cycle, and we need to break that. So my plea to all Kenyans is, how can we bridge that gap? If it is the new economy, ICT, how do we tax that? So we need to be creative. That's why I was talking about institutional strengthening. Build the capacity of KRA and National Treasury to formulate tax policies to tax a new economy. That requires a lot of creativity and innovation. So mine is just say, thank you very much. It is possible, it is doable. Let's fill that gap of 2 trillion, which already exists in the economy, but it's how you extract from it in a way that incentivizes production. Back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ari. Always a challenge. Now you've thrown a number 7 for us to look for that 2 trillion of our tax potential.
Look for
Maybe
it.
I should have given you the last word so that we just close it and run away. But thank you very much for that challenge, the 2 trillion challenge of our tax potential. I'm informed that Mr. Henry Kafogo is now online. Mr. Kafogo, are you online? I need to take a quick comment from you. Can you hear me? All right. Can you hear me, Mr. Kafogo? All right. As we sort your microphone out, allow me to bring on board Justice Mabaya. What is your final word? So that we stop bringing too many tax disputes to your court. What's your final challenge to carry?
Thank you, Kemani. Can we have stable tax policies as well as tax laws that are not short-term in nature, which are reviewed each and every year, thereby triggering unnecessary tax disputes? We should have tax policies and tax regimes that are clear, transparent, and predictable. That's all.
Predictable. It sounds like you even just delivered a ruling. Tax policy that's predictable and stable. Okay, I see you,
consistent.
Yes, and consistent. You know, when we talk about predictability and stability and consistency, it takes me back to children. When you're bringing up children, the reason why they keep walking around holding a table is because the table is stable, it is consistent, it is predictable. Children know the table will not fall, and that's the psychology of a human being. Human beings do not like to live in an environment that they cannot foretell, they cannot prepare. And so, thank you for that. Fine, Henry Kafogo, I understand you're now on call. Your quick comment. Yes, please go ahead, Henry. Chairman of the Water Bottlers Association of Kenya. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's a very good discussion that we're having. And I'm so happy that KRA, you are now hearing what the SMEs are saying, including our CS, Bwana Chelugui, even Bwana, the MD Ashif Kasam has said something that we hope you are going to implement. And I would just like to emphasize, we are here to work with you together. We don't want to be seeing you and running. We are here to work with you. It's a fact. We see you and we run, and we don't want to be in a situation where we are. We also need peace of mind in the way we operate in our businesses. We've been trying to propose to KRA that even from the members that I take care of, in a nutshell, I can count and I can say, if you agree to some of our proposals, I can assure you that in 1 year, my water kiosks will give you around 250 million in 1 year, if we agree to the proposals that we've been sharing. And we don't want this to be an academic, another academic program. We share a lot, but at the end of the day, we get harassed. And imefika wakati, the taxpayers does not want to be harassed. We just want peace of mind. We want to operate. Thank you for your stakeholder engagement team. They are very helpful. The other thing, as Mteti has been saying, sometimes we are like the tax experts. We stand on behalf of KRA to inform members that this is supposed to fall under TOT. This is your threshold for VAT. So there's that gap for taxpayer education. And if we can do it like on a sector by sector, I'm happy that the CG is going to Kamkunji. I'm also inviting either your tax policy experts or tax policy commissioner to come and sit with me at one of our shops so that you can get a feel of what we go through. Sometimes tunapeleka maji mpaka 10th floor. Yes. And we want to pay our fair share. But sometimes now when you treat us like criminals, actually my request is to KRA, don't treat us like criminals. We are Kenyans and we want to pay taxes, but we want to pay taxes in decorum. That's one of the prayers that every SME is asking, because when you visit our shops, everyone gets scared. Like in Busia town, I was told that people were closing shops. Why? Because we fear KRA more than we fear reason. We fear KRA more than we fear police. And that is for a fact. That is what the ground is saying. So if you're willing to hear what the ground is saying, then we're here to work with you and we shall support you. I promise. Thank you.
Henry, if I knew you were going to whip us like that, I would have not given you the microphone. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I mean, we have really taken your feedback very positively. I think it's important. And I think that's what the discussion, this plenary really was, this plenary and the plenary before was about. It's people, the taxpayer is talking, and the question is, are we listening? I think that's the biggest challenge that we are receiving today. And so thank you, Henry, even for that, and just been very candid and honest with the voice that is on the ground. So Richard Muteti, has Henry spoken your last word for you, or do you have a final word that you want to crown now nicely? But give it softly, don't give it too hard. Richard Muteti. Richard, are you on? Mr. Muteti? Okay. Oh, we were looking forward to your final word. Richard Muteti, the CEO of the Confederation of Micro and Small Economic Enterprises in organization in East Africa. Are you there, Mr. Richard Muteti? Can you hear me? Okay. All right. I think maybe kuna hitilafu ya mtambo. All right. I see my Commissioner General is around. Do we have a final word before we go to Director Ashif to wrap it up for us? Mr. Commissioner General, Mr. Humphrey Watanga? Okay, fair enough. Director Ashif, you have had. Please wrap this up for us. This was a heavy one. Please wrap this up for us so that we can take a nice lunch break and come back in the afternoon.
First, I want to thank all the panelists for joining us and everybody for joining us on behalf of KRA. I think the bigger lesson we are learning today, or the bigger message that we are getting, is that there is no one size-fits-all tax policy. And we have to have tax policy that is, takes into account the different economic sectors, but also the MSMEs, because they don't have the sophistication to comply if you make tax laws very complex. Secondly, is what I'm hearing is everybody is willing to pay their fair share of taxes, provided they know where that money is going and how we are treating them. Okay, and today in this session, I see 1,000 people here. There are 18 million SMEs that are not there on this platform. How are we reaching out to them? So I think our reaching out to them becomes very critical as a revenue authority. And the third is, looking at a stable, long-term, well-thought-through tax policies based on consultation and input from the sectors and not individual taxpayers. Because sometimes tax policies are done based on lobbying of individual taxpayers rather than looking at what the sector and what is in the benefit of that sector. And that's the third part that, I've taken from this. But on the other hand, KRA is also working at simplifying the tax regime. It might be slower than what people like, but a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. And I think that step has been taken. And lastly, I think it's a policy part, it's not a KRA part, is on the tax laws. The recent drafting of some of the laws is creating a lot of gray areas in interpretation. It's not clear. And, how we respond to tax clarifications from taxpayers is very critical. The tax law is an enabler. Once you're given a tax law, then we should facilitate how people can benefit from that policy rather than when a letter comes, we want to interpret it the total other way so we can collect tax. Okay, so I think the drafting and our own interpretation are a challenge. So I think these are some of the areas that which are very positive feedback that we need to work on as a revenue authority. But thank you everyone for joining.
I couldn't have said it
Ashif.
better. Thank you very much, Director Ashif Kassam, for just wrapping this session up. And yes, we have heard you. Fantastic conversation around the national tax policy. How can we make it predictable? How can we make it stable and a benefit to all? Thank you very much, my panelists. You were amazing. We appreciate the candid conversations that we've had. Thank you to our delegates who have been chatting endlessly, asking the questions on our Q&A. Thank you to our SME subject matter experts who have been with us, just answering the questions from our delegates. Thank you for all our delegates coming to us from across the region. We appreciate you. Thank you to our CS of Cooperatives and MSME, Mr. Simon Chulugwe, for his opening remarks as the keynote address for this particular plenary. So we appreciate all of you. I want to kindly request if my panelists can all put their videos on. We take now a nice photo. Now that I see we don't have backlight, now we are looking nice. We are energized. Even Justice Mabe has put on his spectacles for this one. So this is a hot one. Let me see if our media team is ready. We put on our video, smile, and we can take, let me see, and take a nice screen grab. Thank you all very much. Let's see whether this is gonna work. Yes, there we go. Asanteni Sana, we appreciate you. Let's take a lunch break for now, and we'll be back at 2 o'clock to finish plenary 3 of the Annual Tax Summit. It's the 9th Annual Tax Summit. We're live on KRA TV, Kenya's first online tax education channel. Now that we've talked a lot about tax education, and we are live as well on the various social media platforms. I'm going to see you at 2 o'clock. Please grab a meal, and then we meet. Same link, same place. Tell your teams. The afternoon talks about export promotion, I believe. It's a great one. It's a great one as well. So see you, Daktari. See you, Director. See you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great one. And Kwaheri. Bye. See you in the afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Bye, everyone. Is anybody coming in the afternoon?
No. We need a lot of education, cross-education, so that KRA can know that the informal economic sector is structured differently, away from the formal sector. And the informal sector also needs to appreciate the mandate of the KRA and why it is important to pay tax. Once we reach that understanding, we are ready as an informal economic sector to offer tax ambassadors based on our subsectors in this country, and that conversation will now assist this country to broaden the tax base in this country. This is the first time we are asked how to participate in a policy on tax that affects us. We have a tirade of a combination of skilled, unskilled, educated, non-educated, semi-educated. So how you handle the formal sector? If you handle the informal sector that way, there will be a mismatch. So you need to have a standalone policy that targets the informal economic sector. And I tell you, the informal economic sector is driving this economy. Today, in every home, you are touched by the informal economic sector. You are touched by the Juakali sector. Either the roof that you are under, the furniture you have, the shoes, the clothes. You will, in your rural areas, we power even the homes with the stoves, lighting. There are so many innovations in the Juakali sector. And we are happy that for the first time in this country, the conversation is about us. And we are happy to show us and to show you what we are made of. And if we have a structured collaboration,